Chosen one, take a breath and lean in, because this moment was not random. This pause in your day was not an accident. And the fact that your eyes are moving across these words right now is not coincidence but coordination, divine orchestration, a precise intersection between heaven's timing and your readiness to hear what your spirit has been sensing, but your mind has not yet fully understood, because there is a message moving toward you with urgency. A message not meant for casual curiosity, not meant for entertainment, not meant for those who treat the things of God lightly, but meant for the ones who have been walking through life with a quiet weight in their chest, a deep knowing they could never explain, a sense of being set apart even when they tried to blend in. And if your heart is not aligned with truth, if you are committed to illusion, ego, and performance, something in you will resist this, and you will turn away. But if you are truly cold, if there is sincerity in your spirit, you will feel something settle as you read, because this is confirmation, this is clarity, this is heaven, pulling back the curtain on experiences that have confused you for years, and finally giving language to what you have been living. And by the time this message finishes moving through you, you will understand yourself differently. You will interpret your past differently, and you will carry your presence differently, with peace instead of questioning, with confidence instead of quiet self-doubt. Because many of you have noticed it but never knew what to do with it. The looks that linger too long, the eyes that lock onto you, and then quickly look away. The rooms that subtly shift when you enter, even though you said nothing, did nothing dramatic, wore nothing extraordinary, and still something changed, and you walked away wondering, was that in my head? Did I imagine that? But you did not imagine it, and you are not being paranoid, and you are not overthinking. You are perceiving something real, something spiritual, something deeper than personality and beyond appearance. And if this truth is already echoing in your spirit, mark this moment, because recognition is happening, and recognition is the beginning of release, the release from shrinking, the release from self-editing, the release from apologizing for a presence God intentionally designed. What you carry cannot be seen with natural eyes, yet it is felt immediately, because when God chooses a person for assignment, He places a kind of spiritual imprint on them, not a badge of superiority, not a decoration for ego, but a mark of responsibility, a mark of purpose, a mark that says this life is not random, this soul is not drifting, this person has been shaped through pressure, refined through isolation, strengthened through battles no one applauded, and that invisible imprint carries weight, and weight always affects atmosphere, weight always changes rooms, weight always slows people down, whether they understand why or not. And that is why you can walk in quietly and still feel a tension shift, because your presence speaks before your mouth ever does. It communicates stability in a world addicted to performance. It communicates restraint in a culture of impulsiveness. It communicates depth in spaces used to surface-level interaction. And most people are not accustomed to standing near someone who does not leak insecurity, who does not scramble for validation, who does not rush to prove worth. And that calm, anchored energy exposes the internal chaos. Many are hiding, so they stare, not always because they admire you, not always because they dislike you, but because something in them was interrupted. Something in their internal pattern was disrupted, because you carry order without trying, peace without performing it, and authority without announcing it. And that kind of presence forces people into awareness of themselves, and awareness can be uncomfortable when someone has been avoiding their own truth. So the silence you meet is often not rejection but processing, not disrespect but recognition mixed with uncertainty, because they are trying to figure out where to place you, and you do not fit their usual categories. You are not loud enough to dismiss, not weak enough to overlook, not familiar enough to control. So they observe, they measure, they pause, and you misread that pause as something wrong with you, when in reality, it is evidence of something real within you. And this is where healing begins. When you stop interpreting every quiet reaction as a personal failure and start seeing it as spiritual impact. Because authority does not need permission to be felt. And when true authority enters a space, words become careful. movements become slower, people become aware, even if they cannot articulate why. And there are those who sense immediately that you see more than you say, that you understand more than you reveal. And being around someone who cannot be easily read unsettles those who rely on manipulation, performance, or masks. So they go quiet, not because you threaten them, but because something in them feels exposed in your presence. And you must stop shrinking yourself to make that easier for them, because you were never designed to dilute what God formed through years of refining. The discomfort your presence triggers is not cruelty, it is contrast, and light does not apologize for revealing what darkness hoped would stay hidden. And this same mark that unsettles some draws others, because there are spiritually hungry people who feel safe near you without knowing why, people whose nervous systems calm when you are around, people whose spirits recognize rest in your steadiness, and others whose consciences get loud around you, not because you judge them, but because truth in you activates awareness in them. And some stare simply because strength that does not need to prove itself is rare, and rarity draws attention, and you must learn to sit peacefully in that reality, to let observation happen without internal panic, to breathe without rushing to fill silence, because your assignment is not to manage other people's reactions. Your assignment is to remain aligned with what God placed inside you. There is also a deeper layer many of you have sensed but doubted, and it is this: spirit recognizes spirit before the mind understands anything. There is a level of interaction beyond words, beyond introductions, beyond logic, where something inside one person detects the frequency of another instantly, and that recognition can bring reverence, curiosity, or even fear. And fear often expresses itself as silence, because when someone feels something they cannot control or explain, they freeze, and that freeze looks like staring, like pausing, like not knowing what to say. And you interpreted that as social awkwardness or personal rejection, when in reality, it was spiritual recognition without vocabulary. And not everyone has the maturity to handle that recognition with confidence. Some feel small, some feel exposed, some feel confronted by their own lack of depth. And again, that is not your burden to fix. You are not responsible for comforting people through their discomfort with truth. You are not obligated to make yourself smaller so others can feel larger. Your frequency was given for a reason, and part of that reason is to disrupt comfort zones that have become cages, to challenge patterns people thought were normal. And when spirit recognizes spirit, it also reveals intention. Motives get exposed. Masks feel thin. Manipulation loses power. And some people stay quiet because they know their usual tactics will not work on you. Some stay quiet because they are calculating. Some because they are testing. And silence becomes a kind of unspoken evaluation, and you pass by remaining grounded, by not chasing approval, by not scrambling to explain, by not overextending to be liked. And here is freedom. You do not have to interpret every look. You do not have to decode every silence. Not everything is for your analysis. Some things are simply evidence that God placed something in you. Others can feel, but not fully comprehend, and that is enough. The silence around you is also a teacher, a severe but faithful instructor, because when people do not affirm you constantly, you learn to stop living off external validation. When people do not explain themselves, and all of those unseen decisions built spiritual weight, and weight is what heaven trusts with influence. And you are stepping into days where you will start seeing evidence that your private faithfulness produced public authority, not loud authority, not performative leadership, but the kind of authority that calms chaos, that brings clarity into confusion, that shifts conversations simply by entering them. And you will look back and realize the loneliness, the misunderstandings, the seasons where you felt unseen were not abandonment, they were insulation. God was protecting the formation of your identity from voices that would have distorted it before it was strong enough to stand. This final stretch of transition will require one thing above all: trust without constant explanation, movement without full visibility, peace without all the answers. Because where God is taking, you cannot be navigated by overthinking, only by alignment. And alignment often feels quieter than ambition, less dramatic than striving, but far more powerful. Unga. 2. And you will notice a new confidence rising that does not need to announce itself. A settled knowing that you are not chasing destiny, but walking into what has been walking toward you. And this is where striving breaks off, where comparison loses its grip, where the pressure to prove dissolves. Because when identity locks in, performance falls away, and you start moving from overflow instead of deficiency, giving because you are full, not to become full, loving because you are secure, not to earn security. And this inner fullness will be the very thing that sustains you when external things still fluctuate. Do not be surprised when people begin seeking your counsel, your perspective, your presence in moments of decision, because the stability God built in you is becoming a resource for others, and you must steward that without pride and without self-neglect, remembering you are a vessel, not the source, a channel, not the origin, and humility will keep the flow clean, because pride clogs what grace wants to move through, and the more you remain surrendered, the more safely God can increase what rests on your life. And increase is not only promotion, it is responsibility. It is representing heaven accurately, in spaces where distortion has been normal, and that requires ongoing intimacy, ongoing recalibration, ongoing return to stillness, because stillness is where your spirit realigns when the world gets loud. You will also begin to see closure where there used to be questions, clarity where there used to be confusion, and a quiet detachment from things that once had emotional control over you. And this is freedom maturing, not dramatic, not explosive, but steady, where triggers lose power, where old fears no longer dictate choices, where you can observe without absorbing, love without losing yourself, engage without being entangled. And this is the sign that healing has moved from concept to reality, because healed people do not react from wounds. They respond from wholeness, and wholeness carries a different energy, one that does not need to fight for space, because it naturally creates it. As you move forward, remember that not everyone will understand this version of you, and that is okay. Understanding is not a prerequisite for obedience, and agreement is not required for assignment, because God did not call you to be universally comprehended. He called you to be faithful. And faithfulness will sometimes look like walking a path few can relate to, making decisions others cannot explain, staying quiet when others would argue, moving when others would wait, and waiting when others would rush. And your peace in those moments will be the confirmation that you are aligned, because divine direction carries a calm that logic cannot always produce. And now, let this seal not just as information but as impartation. Let it sink beneath thought into spirit. Father, anchor them in unshakable identity. Silence every voice that tries to reattach them to versions of themselves they have outgrown. Strengthen their discernment, so they trust what you are showing them. Guard their heart from pride as influence grows and from fear. When new levels stretch them, surround them with divinely aligned connections and remove every tie that hinders their assignment. Let peace be louder than pressure. Let clarity rise in the right moments, and let their life become living evidence that obedience produces stability, that surrender produces authority, and that those you form in hidden places you reveal at the right time. And obedience often feels like stepping while still trembling, trusting that provision meets movement, and capacity grows in motion, not in hesitation. There will also be a deeper compassion forming in you, but it will be different from people-pleasing. It will not overextend. It will not self-abandon. It will be rooted in wisdom, where you can love people without losing yourself, where you can help without carrying what is not yours to carry, where you can pray without trying to control outcomes. And this is mature love, love that serves without entangling, love that gives without draining, love that trusts God with what only God can change. And some will not understand this new way you love, because they were used to access without boundaries. But boundaries do not block love. They protect its purity, and God is purifying your heart from the need to be needed, so you can be effective instead of exhausted. As this shift continues, Your sensitivity to God's direction will heighten. Small nudges will feel louder. Subtle checks in your spirit will be harder to ignore. And this is intimacy growing. Because guidance is clearest where closeness is strongest. And you are being invited into partnership, not just belief, where you do not merely pray for direction but walk in conversation with it, adjusting in real time. And this lifestyle requires trust, because not every instruction will come with full explanation. Sometimes you will be led to step back without drama, to stay quiet when you could speak, to move when staying would be easier. And obedience in those moments builds spiritual authority that cannot be faked. Authority born from surrender, not striving. And hear this clearly. The resistance you may feel rising around you is not always a sign you are off track. Sometimes resistance confirms alignment because growth threatens what is comfortable. Light irritates eyes used to darkness, and clarity confronts confusion. And you cannot carry breakthrough without brushing against opposition. But you are not fighting for victory. You are moving from it. And the battles that come now are not to defeat you but to reveal what you have become, to show you your own strength, to demonstrate that the fear that once ruled you no longer has the same grip. And every time you respond with peace instead of panic, with prayer instead of overreaction, with stillness instead of scrambling, you are reinforcing a new identity, one that cannot be shaken by every external shift. So settle into this truth as it seals over you like a covering. You are in transition, but not lost, being stretched, but not abandoned, being refined, not reduced. And the same God who marked you, who shaped you in silence, who carried you through misunderstanding, is now positioning you where your presence will not only be felt but needed, where your steadiness will become shelter for others, where your discernment will protect more than just you, and where your obedience will open doors not only for your life, but for those connected to your assignment. And as you move forward, let this become your quiet declaration before heaven, before fear, before every uncertain step. I will not shrink back into old versions of myself to make others comfortable. I will not trade alignment for approval. I will not confuse silence with absence. And I will trust the one who formed me in hidden places to lead me into open spaces at the right time. And may that trust root so deeply in you that even when the path curves, even when timing stretches, even when clarity unfolds gradually, you remain steady, because you now know the pattern of God: preparation before promotion, silence before speaking, hidden roots before visible fruit. And you are right on schedule, not behind, not overlooked, but positioned. And as this settles, may peace rise. Not fragile peace dependent on circumstances, but grounded peace anchored in identity. The kind that lets you walk into any room without shrinking, leave any room without chasing, and stand in any moment knowing heaven stands with you. Chosen one, this is where everything converges, where the quiet shaping, the uncomfortable separating, the deep internal stabilizing all begin to reveal why none of it was random. Because you are not just being prepared to carry a different life, you are being prepared to carry a different level of spiritual atmosphere. And atmospheres shift regions, families, environments, and futures. And you have underestimated how far the ripple of your obedience actually reaches. Because you measured your life by visible milestones, while heaven measured it by invisible impact. By prayers you prayed when no one saw, by temptations you resisted when no one would have known, by moments you chose integrity over convenience, by times you stayed silent instead of defending your ego. Because awareness always precedes elevation, and you are stepping into a phase where what you carry internally will begin pressing outward, where the hidden formation season starts translating into visible alignment. And this is the part where many people become uncomfortable, not with you, but with the demand your growth places on their stagnation. Because once you know who you are, you move differently, you respond differently, you tolerate less, you discern faster, and you no longer participate in dynamics that drain what God is building. And the same presence that once only caused people to stare will now begin to expose crossroads, forcing decisions in others that they did not want to face yet. Because when light intensifies, neutrality becomes impossible. People either lean toward truth or retreat deeper into avoidance, and you must not internalize their reactions as personal rejection, because this stage is about separation, not punishment, refinement, not loss. Because God cannot bring you into the environments prepared for your next level, while you are still entangled in spaces that only fit your past version. And many of the relationships, conversations, and access points that feel like they are fading are not being stolen, they are being sifted. Because where you are going requires clarity of alignment, and clarity often feels like reduction before it feels like expansion. You are entering a stretch where your discernment will sharpen almost to the point of discomfort, where you will sense shifts in tone, intention, and energy faster than ever before. And this is not to make you suspicious, it is to make you precise, because you are being trained to move by spiritual signal rather than emotional impulse. And precision is what protects purpose. And you will notice that things you once tolerated easily now feel heavy. Conversations that once felt normal now feel draining. Environments that once entertained you now feel noisy. And do not mistake that for arrogance or detachment. It is adjustment. Your internal atmosphere is changing. And when your inner world elevates, your tolerance for misalignment decreases naturally. Not because you think you are better, but because your spirit is calibrated differently now. And calibration determines what feels like home and what feels like friction. And God is teaching you to honor that signal without guilt. Because guilt has kept many chosen ones stuck in places they already outgrew. Staying loyal to history instead of destiny. Maintaining access for people who were only assigned to a chapter, not the whole story. There is also a strengthening happening in your voice, not necessarily louder in volume, but firmer in conviction, where you will begin to speak less, but mean more. Where your no will no longer come wrapped in long apologies. Where your yes will be intentional, not impulsive, and some will say you have changed. But what they are really noticing is that you have consolidated. You are no longer scattered trying to be everything for everyone. You are centered, and centered people are harder to manipulate. And manipulation often disguises itself as closeness until boundaries appear. And then, the tension reveals the truth. And you must let that revelation happen without rushing to repair what God is exposing. Because not every strained connection is meant to be restored. Some are meant to be revealed and released. And release is not cruelty when it is obedience. You will also begin to feel a deeper stillness in moments that once triggered anxiety, a calm that does not come from circumstances improving but from identity stabilizing. Because when you know who you are, uncertainty around you does not automatically create uncertainty within you. And this is the peace that surpasses understanding, not the absence of movement, but the presence of anchoring. And this anchoring is what allows God to trust you with greater influence. Because influence without stability becomes ego, but influence anchored in identity becomes stewardship, and you are being trusted with more weight, more responsibility, more visibility in the spirit before it becomes visible in the natural. And that increase requires internal quietness, because noise inside distorts direction outside. Do not be surprised if opportunities begin to approach you that feel slightly beyond your comfort zone. Conversations that stretch you, roles that feel larger than your self-image. Because the version of you that struggled with self-doubt cannot step into the assignments prepared for the version of you who knows God is the source. And these invitations are not random. They are indicators that preparation has matured enough for participation, and you may feel the old voice whisper, "You are not ready." But readiness in God's kingdom is not the absence of nerves. It is the presence of obedience. You stop trying to control their perceptions. When people do not engage the way you expected, you learn to be full without their input, and silence removes the crutch of approval and forces you to stand on spiritual stability. And many of you were conditioned to believe silence meant something was wrong, that quiet meant rejection, that you must have offended someone, so you rush to apologize, to over-explain, to perform. But God has been breaking that conditioning, teaching you that silence is not punishment but preparation, training you to carry influence without being influenced, to hold authority without constant reassurance, to be content in solitude, so you are never desperate in community, because desperation is what leads people into the wrong connections, the wrong compromises, the wrong alignments, and silence filters. Silence reveals. Silence shows you who respects your boundaries and who tests them, who approaches with genuine intent and who only comes when they need something. And it also creates space for God's voice to get louder than the noise you were used to filling every gap with. You carry power you did not manufacture, power that grew quietly while you thought nothing was happening, and that power is why people assess you before you speak, why your presence alone shifts dynamics. Because true power does not shout, it does not advertise, it simply exists, and existence is enough to be felt. And many of you were afraid of that strength, taught that confidence equals arrogance, that presence equals intimidation, so you minimized yourself. But your power is not for dominance, it is for deliverance, not for control but for covering, not for show but for service, and you cannot serve powerfully while apologizing for the strength God entrusted to you. And part of maturity is realizing you do not owe everyone explanations about your process, your decisions, your boundaries. Some things are sacred between you and God, and over-explaining weakens boundaries, invites unnecessary opinions, and drains your energy. But when you stop explaining, people stop feeling entitled to explanations. When you stop defending every choice, people stop attacking them for sport, and you become discerning instead of overly accessible, sharing your inner world with those who have proven they can honor it. And hear this with hope. The silence you are experiencing is seasonal, not permanent. There is a shift forming beneath the surface. Because preparation never stays hidden forever, there comes a time when inner formation becomes visible fruit, when consistency becomes undeniable, when the quiet strength you carried begins to show results, and the same people who once watched silently begin to speak with respect, to approach with questions, to adjust their tone, not because you demanded it, but because truth matured. And God protects you through seasons of silence, so premature praise and premature criticism cannot shape you before you are ready. And you will know the shift has arrived when you no longer feel the need to interpret reactions, when peace replaces analysis, when what people think loses control over your internal state, and as clarity increases, those not aligned will drift away naturally, while the right people step forward without you recruiting them. And humility must guard your heart then, because recognition is not the goal. Alignment is. Recognition is only a byproduct of sustained obedience. So rest here. Nothing about your experience has been wasted. You are not behind, not overlooked, not strange. You have been in preparation, and preparation often looks quiet from the outside. You do not need to change who you are to be accepted. Do not need to chase words from people still trying to understand themselves. Your assignment now is simple. Stay aligned, stay grounded, stay still. Trust that God is managing conversations you are not meant to have yet, closing mouths that would speak too soon, protecting you from noise that would disturb your peace. And as this message seals, let this become prayer. God, anchor their heart in truth. Silence the lies that made them doubt their own discernment. Strengthen their spirit to carry what you have placed inside them without apology. Guard their mind from overanalysis. Guard their heart from shrinking. Surround them with the right voices at the right time. And let peace be the sign that they are walking in alignment. And let them move forward knowing the silence was never rejection but redirection. The stairs were not judgment but recognition. And the shift they have been waiting for is already in motion. And they are exactly where they need to be, walking in peace, in power, and in purpose. Chosen one, do not think for a moment that what you have already heard is the fullness of it, because what God begins in revelation, He continues in activation. And now that your understanding has been opened, your responsibility shifts, because awareness always precedes.